Chapter 9. Rising Stakes. Dawn brought rain. It began as a gentle mist while the village still slept, droplets so fine they seemed to float rather than fall. By first light, it had transformed into a steady downpour that drummed against thatched roofs and turned pathways into shallow streams. The mountain forests surrounding the settlement disappeared into gray curtains of water, their boundaries erased by the deluge. Takeshi stood at the edge of the covered veranda, watching the rainfall intensify. 2 victories against the alien hunters had shifted the village's atmosphere from desperate preparation to cautious hope. Today would test whether this change in fortune was mere chance or the beginning of something more. "The scouts have returned," Masaru announced, appearing beside him with characteristic quiet. Though only a day had passed since his victory in the dueling ring, the cautious Ronin carried himself differently, his movements more fluid, his perpetual hesitation less visible. "What did they observe?" Takeshi asked, noting how the rain sluiced from Masaru's straw hat in continuous streams. "Much activity in the alien camp. Their leaders gathered before dawn, with gestures suggesting disagreement." Masaru's observations were precise, as always. The champion seemed particularly insistent about something, repeatedly indicating himself and then toward our village. "He wishes to enter combat directly," Takeshi said, "to face the primary threat himself rather than risk further losses." So it would appear, yet the elder overruled him. Masaru's gaze shifted toward the northern forest, where the alien encampment lay hidden. "They've selected another, one whose markings and stance suggest high rank, even among their elite. An escalation, though not yet their champion." Takeshi considered the implications. The aliens were adapting their strategy, responding to consecutive defeats by deploying increasingly capable warriors. "Have they indicated today's opponent?" "Not directly, but the scouts observed the aliens gathering around Daichi's training area yesterday. Their attention seemed focused." This confirmed what Takeshi had suspected. The aliens had been studying all of them, learning their distinctive fighting styles. Kenji's unpredictability had surprised them. Masaru's defensive mastery had frustrated them. Now they would face Daichi's two-sword technique, a style that would present unique challenges to even 4-armed opponents. "Where is he?" Takeshi asked. "In final preparation," Masaru replied. "Alone, as is his preference." Unlike Kenji's expansive warm-up exercises or Masaru's meditative stillness, Daichi's pre-combat ritual remained intensely private. The dual sword master had maintained his distance from the other Ronin, despite their shared purpose, his interaction limited to tactical observations and terse acknowledgments. This separation seemed less about arrogance than habitual solitude, a man accustomed to walking his path alone. "The village is concerned about the rain," Masaru said, changing subjects with characteristic practicality. "Some see it as ill fortune. And others? Miyako tells them rain cleanses and renews, that the heavens themselves wish to witness what transpires between worlds." Takeshi nodded, appreciating the old healer's wisdom. In his years as a wandering Ronin, he had learned that omens carried the meaning people assigned them. The same rainfall could be blessing or curse depending on one's perspective. What mattered was how they responded to the challenge it presented. "We should check on Daichi," he decided. "The procession will need to depart soon if we're to meet the aliens at the appointed time." They found the dual sword master in a small outbuilding near Toru's forge. The space was spare, a simple wooden floor, roof beams exposed overhead, walls unadorned except for a few weapons hooks. Daichi knelt in perfect seiza, both katanas laid before him on a clean white cloth. His eyes were closed, breathing measured, posture immaculate despite the prolonged position that would have caused discomfort in less disciplined warriors. As they entered, he opened his eyes without startlement or surprise. "It is time." "Soon," Takeshi confirmed. "The rain continues to intensify." Daichi nodded once, acknowledging the information without concern. Rain affects all equally. The skilled adapt without complaint. It was perhaps the longest statement they had heard from him since his arrival. As Takeshi observed him more closely, he noted subtle differences in Daichi's demeanor, a slight softening of his typically rigid self-containment, a barely perceptible openness that hadn't been present before. "The aliens have selected an exceptional warrior to face you," Takeshi said, "as expected." Daichi's gaze returned to his blades. "They learn quickly. Miyako has prepared medicine specifically for your fighting style," Masaru offered, setting a small container near the white cloth. Daichi acknowledged this with another slight nod. Her understanding is comprehensive. A moment of silence followed, filled only by the steady percussion of rain against the roof. Takeshi sensed that something significant was occurring within the dual sword master, some internal shift that preceded external action. "I killed my master," Daichi said suddenly, his voice neither apologetic nor defensive, but simply stating fact. Not in anger, but in the pure clarity of combat, his traditional technique against my innovation. Though they had heard fragments of this story before, the direct acknowledgement carried weight. Among samurai, the bond between master and student was sacred. To break it through violence represented either the deepest dishonor or something transcending ordinary understanding. "He attempted to cripple you," Takeshi recalled from Daichi's brief previous mention, "to prevent what he could not control." Daichi lifted one of his katanas, examining its edge. He believed the two-sword technique violated proper form, that it sacrificed depth for mere advantage. His inspection complete, he returned the blade to its place. He was not entirely wrong. This admission, so at odds with Daichi's previous certainty, suggested deeper reflection than any of them had witnessed from him before. "And now?" Masaru asked. "Now I understand that neither was entirely right." Daichi reached for Miyako's medicine, consuming it with methodical efficiency. There is value in both tradition and innovation, in preservation and adaptation. He closed his eyes briefly as the bitter liquid took effect. Perhaps this is what these star visitors are learning as well. The insight was unexpected from the typically taciturn warrior. Before either companion could respond, Miyako herself appeared at the doorway, her aged frame silhouetted against the gray curtain of rain beyond. "It is time," she announced. "The procession gathers." Daichi rose in a single fluid motion, securing both swords at his hip in the customized mounting that allowed simultaneous draw, an arrangement as unorthodox as the technique it enabled. For a moment, he appeared to hesitate, something uncharacteristic in his typically decisive movements. "Should I fall today?" he said finally. "My swords should be given to one who will use them with understanding, not merely skill." Then he moved past them towards the waiting procession, his momentary vulnerability once again concealed behind disciplined composure. Takeshi exchanged glances with Masaru, both recognizing the significance of what they had witnessed. Whether premonition or merely prudence, Daichi had acknowledged the possibility of defeat in a way none of them had explicitly voiced before. "He senses something," Miyako observed quietly as Daichi disappeared into the rain. "As do I." "The medicine?" Takeshi asked, concerned about potential effects on combat readiness. The old healer shook her head. "Perfect balance between perception and control. What he senses comes from within, not from my preparations." She studied Takeshi with eyes that seemed to see beyond physical appearance. "The rain brings clarity even as it obscures. Today's contest carries weight beyond mere victory or defeat." With this cryptic observation, she too moved toward the gathering procession, leaving the two Ronin to follow in thoughtful silence. The journey to the dueling ground became a test of endurance as the rainfall intensified to drenching proportions. Packed earth turned to clinging mud, clear pathways became treacherous slopes, visibility shrank to mere yards in the gray veils of water. The procession moved with determined dignity despite these challenges. Daichi at the center as designated combatant, the remaining Ronin forming a protective formation around him, village representatives following with stoic endurance. By the time they reached the designated area, all were soaked to the skin, despite straw hats and oiled paper coverings. The dueling ground itself had transformed into a shallow pool in places, water collecting in depressions before overflowing into miniature rivulets between raised areas. Through the rain curtain, they could see the alien delegation already present. Their leader occupied the central position, flanked by the commander and the visibly restless champion. Unlike the humans, the aliens seemed unaffected by the downpour, their armor perhaps waterproof, or their physiology simply less vulnerable to moisture. From their midst emerged their selected combatant. Even through the obscuring rain, its exceptional nature was immediately apparent. Taller than those they had faced before, its armor bore elaborate markings that suggested either rank or accomplishment beyond its companions. Most striking was its movement, a fluid precision that spoke of absolute mastery. "Their champion," Hiroshi murmured from his position beside Takeshi. "Not their champion," Takeshi corrected, noting the designated leader of their warriors still standing in observation position. But perhaps something equally dangerous, a specialist selected specifically to counter Daichi's fighting style. The ceremonial preliminaries proceeded with adjustments for the rainfall. Gestures became more emphatic to carry through the visual distortion. Positioning shifted to utilize slightly higher ground where water had not collected as deeply. When formalities concluded, Daichi and his alien opponent entered the central dueling area, each selecting footing with careful consideration for the treacherous conditions. Standing opposite the alien warrior, Daichi appeared almost diminutive, despite his considerable height among humans. The alien towered over him by at least 2 shaku, its 4 arms currently at rest, but clearly designed for combat advantage, unlike anything Earth's evolution had produced. Daichi performed the formal bow of a samurai entering combat, water streaming from his form as he straightened. Then, with deliberate precision, he drew both katanas simultaneously, a single fluid motion that brought the pair of blades into perfect position. The statement was clear: technical mastery in service of lethal purpose. The alien responded with its own ceremonial preparation, 4 arms moving through elaborate patterns. It then drew its weapons, curved blades in its upper hands, with what appeared to be specialized implements in its lower arms, bearing both offensive and defensive capabilities. For several heartbeats, neither combatant moved. Rain filled the space between them, thousands of droplets creating momentary connections in their passage from sky to earth. The gathered observers, human and alien alike, maintained perfect silence despite the downpour, recognizing the gravity of what was about to unfold. Daichi initiated the first movement, a tactical choice that caught many observers by surprise. His dual blades moved in perfect coordination, creating parallel arcs through the rain-filled air as he advanced with explosive speed. Water scattered from his blades in continuous sheets, the droplets momentarily suspended in the air before gravity reclaimed them. The alien responded with reaction time that demonstrated why it had been selected for this critical encounter. Its 4 arms reconfigured instantly, upper weapons intercepting Daichi's blades, while lower implements maintained defensive positioning that prevented follow-up strikes from exploiting potential openings. What followed was combat transformed into art. Daichi's two-sword style created continuous threat without sacrificing defensive integrity, each blade fulfilling offensive and protective functions simultaneously. The alien countered with 4-armed technique specifically optimized for multiple weapon opponents, creating complex interception patterns that accommodated unpredictable attack vectors. "Extraordinary," Hiroshi whispered, professional appreciation overriding concern for their companion. "His Niten Ichiryu is flawless." Indeed, Daichi's technique demonstrated why this controversial style had inspired such extreme reaction from his former master. Where traditional swordsmanship emphasized the katana as unified extension of the wielder's body and spirit, Daichi's dual-blade approach created something more akin to autonomous coordination, left and right hands operating semi-independently while maintaining perfect synchronization through centralized awareness. The alien initially seemed confounded by this approach, its 4-armed technique suddenly lacking its usual overwhelming advantage when confronted with dual implementation from its human opponent. Green fluid appeared at several points along its limbs, where Daichi's blades had found momentary openings in its defense. Superficial wounds that nonetheless demonstrated the effectiveness of his approach. "He's winning," Kenji observed, uncharacteristically serious as he studied the exchange. "For now," Takeshi cautioned, noting subtle adjustments in the alien's positioning. "But it learns with each exchange." Indeed, the alien was adapting with remarkable efficiency, its initial confusion giving way to methodical analysis. Rather than treating Daichi's dual blades as separate threats requiring individual responses, it began addressing them as an integrated system through coordinated defense. 4 arms shifted from predominantly reactive configuration to create proactive patterns that reduced Daichi's offensive options while establishing progressive control over engagement distancing. The rainfall intensified further, sheets of water now falling with such density that visibility reduced to mere silhouettes at moments. Both combatants adjusted to these deteriorating conditions with professional focus. Their footwork became more precise to account for the slick ground, their strikes more definitive to cut through the thickening curtain of water. Daichi maintained aggressive pressure despite the alien's adaptation, his dual blades finding occasional openings despite their diminishing frequency. Water cascaded from his form with each movement, his footing impeccable despite the increasingly treacherous ground conditions. The alien matched this exceptional performance, its 4 arms creating defensive configurations that seemed to anticipate Daichi's intentions milliseconds before implementation. The wounds it had sustained early in the exchange had neither slowed its movements nor diminished its effectiveness. Disciplined control, maintaining optimal functionality, despite injuries that would have significantly compromised lesser opponents. Then something remarkable occurred. Both combatants simultaneously escalated to extraordinary intensity, their movements accelerating beyond what either human or alien observers could fully process. Blades became literal blurs of motion, rain spattering away from their paths like spray from a waterfall striking stone. Where individual movements had been visible before, now there was only the impression of constant motion, steel catching occasional glints of light as it passed through impossible arcs. "I can't follow it," Masaru admitted, his exceptional observational skills reaching their limitation. Even Takeshi, with his decades of combat experience, found himself unable to track individual movements. The distinctive sound of blade impacts transformed from separated instances into continuous metallic humming. A single sustained note, rather than sequential tones. The rain itself appeared to be held at bay around the combatants, droplets diverted by blade passages too rapid to be seen individually. Water splashed upward as their footwork churned the increasingly muddy ground. Neither slipped, despite the treacherous footing. Both adjusted instantly to the changing surface without conscious thought. Their forms became indistinct through speed and rain alike, the boundaries between them blurring as combat transcended ordinary limitations. When this extraordinary sequence finally concluded, both warriors separated momentarily, each bearing new wounds. Daichi now showed a shallow cut along his left shoulder, while the alien displayed a more significant injury where its upper right arm joined its torso, green fluid flowing more copiously than from its earlier wounds. From the alien observation area, their leader made a gesture that Takeshi interpreted as acknowledgement, recognition of exceptional quality. The champion's posture had shifted from restless impatience to focused attention, professional appreciation apparently overriding earlier dismissal. The brief respite ended as combat resumed with renewed intensity. The alien's adaptation had progressed to comprehensive understanding, its four-armed technique now specifically configured to counter Daichi's dual blade approach. Where earlier exchanges had favored the human swordsman, the balance now shifted incrementally toward the alien warrior as it implemented counters developed through intensive analysis during combat itself. Daichi recognized this transition immediately, his technique evolving in response. His movements incorporated elements observed in his fellow Ronin: Kenji's unpredictability, Masaru's perfect defensive timing, Hiroshi's strategic disengagement. This synthesis demonstrated exceptional combat intelligence beyond technical mastery, creating an integrated approach that transcended individual style limitations. The rainfall reached torrential intensity, water now flowing across the dueling ground in sheets that transformed footing from merely treacherous to actively hazardous. Both combatants adjusted to these extreme conditions while maintaining their extraordinary exchange, each movement recalculated to account for reduced traction alongside limited visibility. As the duel entered its 15th minute, extraordinary duration for such intensive combat, subtle indicators of fatigue began manifesting in both participants. Daichi's movements, while maintaining technical precision, had lost fractional speed. The alien's coordination, though still exceptional, showed minor synchronization delays between upper and lower arm pairs during particularly complex sequences. "He's tiring," Hiroshi observed with grim concern. "The dual blade style demands extraordinary stamina." "As is his opponent," Takeshi countered, noting corresponding indicators in the alien's performance. "The question becomes which reaches critical limitation first." The answer began materializing through progressive exchanges. Despite Daichi's extraordinary performance, the alien's four-arm advantage created a fundamental efficiency differential that accumulated significance as fatigue increased. Where the human swordsman needed to maintain perfect neural coordination between semi-independent limbs, the alien's natural configuration provided integrated control through evolutionary development rather than cultivated discipline. Daichi recognized this emerging reality with tactical clarity. His approach shifted toward higher-risk implementation, movements designed to create decisive advantage through momentary vulnerability. This strategic choice demonstrated profound understanding. It reflected philosophical depth, recognizing that continued defensive integrity would merely delay inevitable defeat rather than create victory possibility. The critical exchange developed through perfect confluence between tactical necessity and environmental condition. As rainfall temporarily intensified beyond previous peaks, creating momentary visual obstruction through sheer water density, Daichi executed a maneuver that appeared to sacrifice defensive integrity completely. Both blades committed to offensive implementation simultaneously, creating unprecedented vulnerability by abandoning their dual defensive-offensive functionality in favor of pure attack potential. For a heartbeat, absolute clarity emerged amid visual confusion, Daichi's blades penetrating the alien's defense to find critical vulnerabilities that previous exchanges had identified but never successfully exploited. Both katanas struck with precision, creating wounds that should have proved decisive against any ordinary opponent. Green fluid sprayed outward, momentarily visible even through the rainfall's obscuring curtain, before being diluted and washed away by the continuing deluge. The alien staggered beneath this unprecedented implementation, multiple systems compromised simultaneously through perfectly coordinated strikes. But in this moment of apparent triumph, disaster materialized from within apparent victory. The alien, despite critical injuries, executed a counter-sequence with extraordinary implementation. Its remaining functional arms moved with perfect coordination that suggested pre-planned contingency rather than desperate reaction, creating a strike pattern that exploited the momentary defensive vulnerability Daichi's offensive commitment had necessarily created. Time seemed to slow as Takeshi observed what followed, the alien's blade finding perfect intercepting trajectory against Daichi's exposed position, penetrating defense that no longer existed due to full offensive commitment. The strike landed with precision, finding vital vulnerability with implementation, suggesting ceremonial significance rather than merely tactical necessity. Daichi's expression registered perfect understanding rather than surprise or dismay. His blades continued their motion despite the mortal wound now manifesting at his midsection, completing their intended trajectories with dignity. Both combatants separated by mutual momentum, each maintaining upright positioning despite significant injuries. The alien stood with green fluid flowing freely from multiple wounds, 3 of its 4 arms now compromised beyond effective functionality, despite maintained disciplined posture. Daichi remained standing through what could only be described as perfect will, blood mixing with rainfall as it flowed from his fatal wound. "Masaru," Takeshi directed quietly, maintaining ceremonial composure despite the tragedy unfolding before them. "Prepare to retrieve him with appropriate dignity." For several heartbeats, Daichi maintained his stance. Both katanas still extended in perfect positioning, despite rapidly failing physical capacity. His gaze remained fixed on his alien opponent, communication passing between them without words. The alien performed a gesture sequence that even human observers recognized as profound respect, 4 arms arranged in formal configuration despite their compromised functionality. Daichi responded with corresponding dignity, his final movement bringing both katanas into ceremonial position before his strength finally failed completely. As he collapsed, Masaru moved forward with perfect timing to catch him before he struck the muddy ground, preserving dignity in death. The alien leader stepped forward, making ceremonial movements that officially concluded the duel. The ritual carried significance beyond procedure, establishing genuine recognition regarding exceptional quality despite ultimate outcome. As Masaru carefully supported Daichi's now lifeless form, the dual swordmaster's final expression became briefly visible to Takeshi. Not fear or anguish, but perfect serenity suggesting completion. His controversial journey had reached conclusion through worthy implementation against exceptional opposition. The remaining Ronin gathered around their fallen companion, each offering silent acknowledgement according to their individual nature. Kenji's typically animated features now solemn with genuine respect, Hiroshi's scarred face showing recognition of warrior's passage. He achieved integration at the end, Takeshi observed quietly, as they prepared to bear Daichi's body back to the village. Between tradition and innovation, between technique and understanding. His final strikes were perfect, Masaru confirmed, having witnessed the exchange from closest proximity. Had his opponent been anything less than extraordinary, they would have proved decisive. A worthy death, Hiroshi stated with veteran's understanding, his technique validated through implementation against the most challenging possible opposition. They arranged Daichi's body with careful attention to ceremonial propriety, positioning both katanas across his chest in the configuration that had defined his controversial approach. The rain continued falling as they began their solemn procession back toward the village, water from the heavens washing blood from the fallen warrior in nature's own purification ritual. The alien delegation performed their own ceremonial observance before withdrawing toward their encampment, their injured warrior supported by companions with careful attention that suggested respect rather than mere assistance. Their leader's final gesture toward the human contingent conveyed clear communication despite linguistic barriers, acknowledgement regarding worthy exchange. The score now stood at humans 2, aliens 1. But numbers failed to convey the true significance of what had transpired. A masterless samurai had demonstrated human capability at its most exceptional against beings whose evolutionary pathway had provided natural advantages beyond terrestrial development. Though death had resulted, honor had been established beyond mere survival. As they approached the village with their solemn burden, the rain finally began to diminish, not stopping completely but transitioning from torrential deluge to steady shower that seemed appropriate accompaniment for warriors' final journey. Villagers gathered silently as they entered, their expressions showing genuine grief despite Daichi's brief residence among them. In their eyes, he had become their defender regardless of previous status or personal isolation. "Prepare the shrine for proper ceremony," Takeshi directed as they carried Daichi's body toward Miyako's healing room. Not for treatment, but for appropriate purification before funeral rites. He deserves full honors according to Bushido tradition. As attendants took charge of these arrangements, the remaining Ronin gathered in momentary privacy to assess their situation beyond ceremonial requirements. The reality of death had transformed their extraordinary circumstance from theoretical challenge to immediate mortality confrontation. 2 remain, Hiroshi observed, without unnecessary elaboration, veteran pragmatism addressing reality directly. Against their champion and commander at minimum, Takeshi confirmed, strategic assessment proceeding alongside personal respect regarding their fallen companion. Daichi proved dual implementation effective despite ultimate outcome, Masaru noted, tactical observation honoring their companion through continued learning. His technique found vulnerabilities despite their four-armed advantage. "And they bleed," Kenji added, uncharacteristic seriousness indicating genuine impact beyond his typical deflective humor. No matter their technology or biological advantages, they can be wounded, weakened, defeated. This fundamental truth provided foundation for continued resistance, despite the sobering reality of Daichi's death. Their extraordinary visitors possessed overwhelming advantages through both evolution and technology, yet remained vulnerable to human determination properly applied through disciplined implementation. "Tomorrow they will expect response," Takeshi stated. "We must decide who faces them next, knowing now the full stakes involved." The 3 remaining Ronin exchanged glances, unspoken question hanging between them regarding next representative selection. Each carried different capabilities alongside distinctive limitations, Kenji's unpredictability balanced against tactical impulsiveness, Masaru's defensive mastery alongside potential hesitation tendency, Takeshi's integrated understanding coupled with still healing injuries from previous encounters. "I'll go," Kenji declared, without his typical flamboyant presentation, genuine determination replacing characteristic performance. "My unconventional approach provides optimal counter against their analytical methodology." "Their champion will likely enter combat directly now," Hiroshi cautioned from his advisory position, injury still preventing direct participation despite tactical contribution. "Your unpredictability proved effective previously, but their leadership warriors operate at elevated capability." "All the better," Kenji responded, with flicker of his usual confidence resurfacing through genuine resolve. The greater the challenge, the more satisfying the victory. Before further discussion could develop, Miyako entered with ceremonial dignity. "Preparations for Daichi's funeral proceed," she informed them. "The village requests your participation in traditional observance at sunset." "We shall attend with appropriate respect," Takeshi confirmed. "His sacrifice deserves proper recognition before we face tomorrow's challenge." As they dispersed to prepare for these solemn duties, Takeshi remained briefly with Miyako, shared understanding developing between them regarding their extraordinary circumstances' true nature. "The rain has cleansed his passage," the old healer observed. "A warrior's departure accompanied by heaven's acknowledgement." "He found resolution at the end," Takeshi noted, having witnessed Daichi's final expression suggesting completion. "Between tradition and innovation, between form and function. Integration achieved through ultimate challenge," Miyako agreed with wisdom. "His controversial journey reaching conclusion through worthy implementation." As they too departed toward respective responsibilities, preparations for both funeral ceremony and continued resistance proceeded throughout the village with subdued determination, replacing earlier optimistic anticipation. The contest had transformed through Daichi's death from abstract challenge to mortal confrontation, reality acknowledged without surrendering resolve. The aliens too appeared affected by the day's developments, their encampment showing activity patterns suggesting ceremonial observance. Whether honoring worthy opponent or preparing their champion for direct engagement, their behavior indicated recognition regarding the exchange's significance. Under clearing skies that allowed sunset visibility between dissipating rain clouds, the village gathered to honor Daichi's passage with traditional ceremony, adapted to their extraordinary circumstances. His body had been prepared according to Bushido custom, both katanas positioned with ceremonial precision, reflecting his distinctive approach even in death. The remaining ronin stood as honor guard, each representing different aspect regarding warrior's path, while collectively acknowledging their fallen companion. As night finally descended, stars becoming visible between remaining clouds, the village quieted into respectful silence. Tomorrow would bring continued challenge, requiring proper response despite diminished resources. 3 remaining ronin-facing opponents, whose capabilities had been demonstrated through Daichi's death, despite his exceptional implementation. The stakes had been established beyond theoretical consideration. Life and death, honor and sacrifice, worthy challenge and meaningful purpose. What had begun as defense against unexpected visitors had evolved into profound exchange between civilizations, separated by cosmic distance, yet connected through recognizable values. And beneath the stars connecting their respective origins across incomprehensible distance, both humans and aliens contemplated continuation beyond the day's significant developments. Preparation proceeding alongside philosophical consideration regarding contests that transcend physical confrontation to establish understanding across boundaries spanning not just cultures, but worlds.